Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Autopsy, Morbidity Triumphant, out September 30th on Peaceville Records. The album has 11 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 8th full-length studio record. They are an American death metal band. Now on this album they put together a design structure that is very balanced, very cohesive. It's impossible to find the cracks. It moves in a very linear way. It takes you from the first to the last song, always in the same path, always in the same direction. It just changes the momentum that it has on a track-by-track basis. So this allows the album to have a little bit more life, and it also allows the listener to see the individuality of the songs, to see the individual fingerprint that each song puts forward. But when you get to the end of the record and you reflect on the listening experience, all you're going to remember was how heavy the album felt, the aggression that it had, and how grimy it sounded. These become the three cornerstones of the entire experience of listening to this record, and because of that, because those three elements permeate throughout the entire record, it really allows the album to be, or at least to feel, a lot more balanced and hide its diversity underneath the surface. As far as the soundscape is concerned, this album is unforgiven death metal. Maybe death grind would be a better definition, because there's a lot of grindcore elements throughout the entire album. But the album has no frills. This album doesn't try to be something that it's not. It doesn't try to hide something underneath it. It just puts all the cards, it puts everything on the table and allows you to experience a death metal album, old school death metal album through and through. It stays true to the band's sound. It stays true to the band's DNA. This record doesn't break the mold. It doesn't try to go in a different direction. It perhaps doesn't try to be something that it's not, either their sound or the band themselves. This record represents Autopsy really well, from a soundscape experience, from how the sound feels, from how unforgiving it is, how thick, how much volume it has, and how simple it is to digest. It's not about the layers, it's not about the texture, it's just about transforming that volume into heaviness, transforming those guitar riffs and those drums into aggression, and then adding that griminess of grindcore in order for the album to have life, to be brutal, to be demolishing at times, and really pounding you to submission. The album is at the cusp of really pushing itself a little bit too far outside the box. 41 minutes is perfect for a record that sounds the way this one does. You're able to take the pounding, survive it, experience it, enjoy it, and perhaps go back for more. So it's an album that stays true to Autopsy. It's a very traditional sounding death metal album. They didn't try to be too fancy, they just tried to be exactly who they are. Now within that sound, two elements jump into the forefront. The drums on this album sound brutal. They have this great tendency to not just bring you down into the mud with the track, but also to create the necessary foundation for the track to then explode and move forward with heaviness, with intent, with intensity and aggression. So I really enjoyed the drum sound throughout the entire album. It created a sense of comfort. You knew exactly what you were going to get from them quality-wise, not necessarily sound-wise, but quality-wise. The moment you start listening to this record, they become a focal point for the listener, and they become a focal point for every single track on this record. Now on the guitar side, I felt like the guitars could have added more flavor to the experience. Two elements that could have changed the dynamic ever so slightly and add perhaps a little bit more life and not allow the album to feel as linear as it does. The guitar solos, while being interesting on this album, they lacked a little bit of purpose. The guitar solos on their own, if you look at the guitar solos in a vacuum, they're great. They have energy, they have that old school flavor, using the whammy bar, adding movement, expanding and contracting within the songs, really having a life of their own. But they're not always there to serve the song. At least that's not the impression that I got. And it should be that way. The solo should be there, not just because it has to be there, but it should be there in order to add something to the way the track feels, to the way the track sounds. And there was a few songs on this record that I just didn't feel like I was getting that out of the solos. They just felt like they were kind of planted in there and not necessarily taking in consideration how did we get to that point and how are we going to move forward. The other element that I would like to see a little bit more on a record like this is some more grooviness from the guitar's point of view. I'm not talking about turning this into a groove metal record. That's not what I want. But there was a few tracks on this album that the guitar riffs were not just heavy, they were not just pounding you, but they also had some groove elements into it. And it changed the texture of the songs. It allowed you to breathe a little bit better within those tracks, and it gave you almost a sense of a reprieve because they felt different from the brutality that you were getting up until that point. There are not enough of those tracks within the whole album to give you some pockets of air, and those pockets of air are important. I know I said earlier 41 minutes was perfect for this record, but you needed a few more of those pockets of air, specifically if the record was to go a little bit further than that 41 minute mark. So I really feel like on the guitar side, while I enjoy the thickness of the guitar sound, while I enjoy the heaviness of the guitar sound, and I enjoy the wall of sound that the guitars and drums together created for this entire album, the guitars could have been pushed a little bit further out of the comfort zone, bringing in a little bit more diversity, bringing in a little bit more energy, or at least deflecting the energy in a different direction. Now the vocals are super consistent from beginning to end. I would say that they are the red line that connects the whole album. The drums not so much, but the vocals definitely yes. They are the glue that brings it all together. That consistency is important. It allows the album to have a sense of balance, and it allows all the songs to be somewhat interconnected, at least vocally. Now, some of the songs are interconnected musically because where one ends, the other one starts, and that's also a nice element that adds to the overall flow, to the design of the record, but it also adds to that linear motion that the album offers. All around, this is a good, safe, expected death metal record from Autopsy. They're not trying to be something that they're not. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're just doing what they know how to do, and they do it well. But it's an album that doesn't really break the mold. It's an album that, while having tons of quality, while sounding great, while having great songs, it doesn't have that element that separates it from other death metal records or even other Autopsy albums. It just feels like a safe choice for the band at this time. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Stab the Brain. This is the opening track on the album. The guitar sounds excellent on this song. It helps define the overall thick experience that the track has. The track has movement. The movement is forward, is linear, but it has movement. And the solo on this track is super explosive. It doesn't necessarily connect perfectly with the track, but it also doesn't disconnect itself from it. It's somewhere in between. But the explosive nature of the solo really adds some impact. It adds some flair to this track. And if you look at it from an opening song on a record, you really need as much flair as possible, because this is going to be a track that's going to grab the attention, or at least has the purpose of grabbing the attention of the listener immediately, and then keeping the listener connected with the remaining experience, with the remaining tracks that are coming afterwards. So I like the fact that there is heaviness, that there is volume, and you still get some bursts of energy that just create enough ebbs and flows within the track without changing, or without completely changing, the overall DNA of the song. Next you have Born in Blood. It's a doomier song. It has a much doomier influence, at least at the beginning and at the ending. And now I love this. If you're gonna start the track with almost a doom riff, like a Candlemass style riff, you need to finish with that same riff, with that same melody. You need to go full circle. You need to give these two bookends and allow the song then in the middle to be as brutal, as dynamic, as fluid as possible. And that's exactly what they did with this song. It starts off very doomy, it explodes, it goes into almost a death grind style approach, musically and vocally. It's a song that feels very intense, that has a fast tempo, that just feels brutal, that's always coming at you, is always engaging with the listener. And then it moves into the end of the track, into that same beginning, that more Candlemass style, doomier riff that just allows the track to feel complete in its essence, giving you two very different experiences within the song itself, making the track feel more dynamic, but because it starts and ends in the same way, it closes it off perfectly. Last but not least, Maggots in the Mirror. This is definitely more of a grindcore song than it is a death metal song. It's the shortest track on the album, under 2 minutes, and it just comes at you fast and furious. It absolutely rips, both musically and vocally. It has a ton of aggression. It feels super demolishing, it's very grimy, it's very dirty, it feels dirty, it sounds dirty, it has all of those grindcore elements, those unpolished elements that add extra intensity and extra aggression to how the song feels. The solo on this track is perfect. I didn't know if they were going to go with a solo or do something different considering the length of the song and the style of the song, but they went with a very compact, short lick solo, depending on how you want to call it. But it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly the dynamic of the song, it fits perfectly into the sound of the song, and it fits perfectly into the length of the song. I couldn't have asked for a better track. This is one of those explosive tracks that you blink and it's gone. It's gone, but you still felt the impact. You still felt that punch to the gut. This is it. Autopsy, Morbidity Triumphant, out September 30th on Peaceville Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.